In the heart of Abejukalo, a modest village tucked between rolling hills and red earth roads, lived a 22-year-old girl named Amara. Her name meant grace, but her life was anything but easy. With long braided hair often tied with faded ribbons, a hot figure wrapped in whatever second-hand dress she could manage, and eyes that still held a flicker of unshaken hope, Amara was the village's brightest student and poorest soul. Her mother sold vegetables in the market. Her father, once a skilled carpenter, had passed when she was just 10. Now it was just Amara and her little brother, Chima, whom she raised like her own. Every day after her university lectures in town, she'd return to Abejukalo, dusty, sweaty, and hungry, but never broken. One hot afternoon, Amara was walking home along the roadside with her worn-out flats nearly falling apart. She had just left her last exam, unsure if she had even written it well enough. The sun was unforgiving, and the wind carried the smell of roasted corn and drying cassava. That's when she saw him. He sat beneath a crooked mango tree by the roadside. Dusty jeans, a torn shirt, and slippers that had seen better days. His beard was overgrown, and he held a rusted walking stick. People walked past him without a second glance. But Amara paused. The man was not old, maybe in his early 30s. His skin was clean, and though he pretended to be coughing weakly, his eyes were sharp, too sharp. Something about him didn't add up. Still, she walked toward him, clutching her old school bag. "You look like you haven't eaten," she said softly, digging into her bag for the small loaf of bread her mother had packed. He looked up in surprise, caught off guard. No one had ever stopped. "You're giving me your lunch?" he asked. "I've eaten," she lied, her stomach already grumbling. "It's not much, but please." He took it slowly. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Amara. I'm David." He hesitated. "Just David." She smiled. "Well, David, this road gets cold at night. Be careful." And she walked on. What Amara didn't know was that David wasn't poor, not even close. He was David Ose Ajay, a Ghanaian-Nigerian billionaire, heir to the Ajay steel empire. But for months now, he'd been traveling villages in disguise, searching for someone real, not someone impressed by his car or his money, but someone who could see a man through dust and torn clothes. And that evening, under the mango tree with Amara's bread in hand, he whispered to himself, "She didn't see a beggar. She saw a man." And for the first time in a long time, David felt something deeper than admiration. He felt seen. Days passed, but Amara couldn't shake the image of the man under the mango tree. There was something in his eyes, a story untold. Meanwhile, David had not returned to his city mansion. He stayed in Abejukalo, sleeping in a hidden guest room at Mama Onome's small compound, paying extra to remain anonymous. No security, no driver. Just a man watching a girl who didn't know the weight of her kindness. Every morning, David sat on the same bench near the village market, pretending to sell charcoal. He wore a hat low and kept his face dusty. And every morning, Amara passed by with books in her hand and a tired smile on her lips. She never looked down on him, never ignored him. Sometimes she nodded. Once she gave him bananas without asking for payment. David learned her routine, how she stopped to greet old Papa Musa every Tuesday, how she used her last coins to buy a kara for her brother, how she tutored village kids for free in the evenings. She gay. Was beautiful, yes, but it was her heart that disarmed him. One rainy day, as the sky cracked with thunder and villagers rushed for shelter, Amara found herself without an umbrella. She stood shivering under a narrow awning near the bakery. That's when David appeared again, barefoot, soaked but calm. He held out a tattered umbrella. "Take it," he said. She blinked. "What about you?" "I like the rain." She smiled, wide, this time, and took it with both hands. "Thank you, David." As she walked away, David turned to watch her disappear between the puddles. Behind him, Mama Onome watched silently from her stall. "You're falling for that girl," she said. David said nothing. "She's poor, but her spirit is gold. You sure you're ready to tell her who you are?" "Not yet," he whispered. "Let her fall for the beggar first." But trouble was around the corner. A man named Felix, the spoiled son of a local politician, had also been watching Amara. He had plans for her, and none of them included respect or love, and when Felix saw the way Amara smiled at the beggar, he began to plot. Felix Ogundele had never heard the word no without punishment following it. At 28 he had power, money, and his father's political protection. The villagers feared him. His cars were loud, his perfume louder, but his heart rotten. When he first laid eyes on Amara at the village library, he decided she would be his next prize. But Amara was not like the girls he was used to. When he offered her a ride, she refused. When he sent a new phone to her home, she returned it. And when he told her, "You should be grateful someone like me is interested," she stared him down and said, "Respect isn't a gift, it's basic." From that day, Felix's interest turned into obsession. One evening, after Amara had finished tutoring at the community center, she stepped outside to find Felix waiting by his black SUV. "I can make your life easier," he said, stepping close. "Your mother won't need to sell vegetables. Your brother won't need second-hand books. You'll wear gold, not dust." She shook her head. "I'd rather wear dust with dignity than wear gold in shame." Felix's jaw tightened. His voice dropped. "You'll regret this." David had watched it all from a distance, hidden behind a row of yam baskets, fists clenched. Later that night, Amara heard a knock on their tiny wooden door. It was David holding a small box. "I'm sorry if I've crossed a line," he began, "but I saw the way that man spoke to you. He doesn't respect you." Amara's eyes softened. "I'm used to men like that." "You shouldn't have." "To be." She didn't answer, just looked at the box in his hand. He held it out. Inside was a small pepper spray canister and a folded note. "If he bothers you again, use this," he said. "And that note, it's the number of a lawyer. A good one. I'll cover it if anything happens." Amara was quiet for a long time before asking, "Who are you really?" David smiled, eyes tired but warm. "Just a man who knows what it means to be seen by someone kind." She took the box slowly. "Thank you, David." But Felix wasn't done. The next day he used his father's influence to have Amara's university funding blocked, claiming she was involved in indecent behavior. She cried in her room, crushed. Her world was collapsing again, until a letter came, an official-looking envelope addressed to her name. She tore it open with trembling hands. Inside, a full scholarship, a new offer, from a private international foundation, signed DOA Foundation. She had no idea what it meant. But somewhere in Abejukolo, under the same mango tree, David Osei Ajay smiled to himself. Amara stood on the narrow veranda of their home, the scholarship letter trembling in her hands. Her mother wept silently in the background. Relief, joy, disbelief, all wrapped in one. Amara didn't understand how it had happened. She hadn't applied for any international scholarship, but she remembered the initials at the bottom, DOA, and then her mind went to David. Could it be? No. He was always dusty, always humble, always quiet. And yet, he knew lawyers. He always showed up at just the right time. And there was something about his posture, his calmness. He never truly looked like someone struggling. He looked like someone pretending. Still, she said nothing, not yet. That same weekend, the community hosted the annual Harvest Festival, a time when villagers danced under the stars, shared food, and told stories late into the night. Amara almost didn't go, but her mother insisted. "Even when life is heavy, child, your feet must touch joy," she said. So Amara went, wearing a simple body-hugging Ankara dress that showed her figure, her long braids flowing freely, her lips stained with a hint of red gloss. She looked like someone no pain could break. David was there too, but he wasn't in rags this time. He wore clean jeans, a fitted white shirt, and leather sandals. His beard was trimmed, his posture straight. For the first time, the villagers noticed. "Him, isn't that the beggar?" someone whispered. "He looks different." Amara approached him slowly, heart pounding. "How you clean up well," she teased. David grinned. "Even a mango tree deserves water once in a while." They danced, slow, quiet, under the stars, The crowd disappeared, just her and him and the drums in the distance. Why do I feel like... You're not telling me everything, Amara asked, not breaking eye contact. David hesitated. Because I'm not, but I promise. When the time is right, I will. Are you married? She asked boldly. No. Engaged? He chuckled. Never. Then I'll wait, he stopped. You will? I don't trust easily, but something in me tells me to trust you. That night he walked her home, not as a beggar, not as a stranger, but as something more. They didn't kiss, not yet. But as he walked away, Amara whispered to the wind, "Don't let me be wrong." Meanwhile, Felix was fuming. His sources told him someone had rescued Amara's education with money and power he couldn't trace. His pride was wounded, and wounded pride turns dangerous. He made a call to someone who owed him a favor. Felix sat in the back of his SUV, lips curled in frustration. His pride couldn't accept that Amara, a poor girl with dust on her shoes, had chosen a beggar over him. But what if that beggar wasn't who he claimed to be? Felix's father had contacts in Lagos and Abuja, and with a single call, Felix discovered something that shocked even him. There was no David in any local registry, but there was a David Osei Adjei, a billionaire industrialist, educated in Oxford, owner of multiple companies across West Africa. Felix laughed. So that's who you are. He didn't plan to quietly confront David. No, he planned to shame him publicly, destroy whatever connection he had with Amara, and leave her humiliated in front of the entire village. 2 days later, the village hosted a public seminar on youth employment, organized by an unknown sponsor. Everyone was invited. Chairs were lined up under white tents, and villagers came dressed in their finest. Amara arrived late, her curves hugged by a fitted purple dress, her braids pulled back into a royal bun. She had received a strange invitation that morning with a single line, "You deserve to see the truth." She saw Felix near the front. He waved at her mockingly, and then the guest speaker was announced. A black SUV pulled up. 4 men in tailored suits stepped out first, then opened the door. David stepped out, no longer dusty, no longer hiding. He wore a navy blue designer suit, dark shades, and confidence that seemed to shake the very ground. The crowd gasped. Amara blinked. Felix stood proudly and shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce your beggar, Mr. David Osei Adjei." A few people chuckled. Others were confused, but David didn't flinch. He took off his sunglasses and looked directly at Amara. "My name is David Osei Adjei," he said. "I came to your village months ago, not to hide, but to learn, to find someone real in a world that no longer values sincerity. And I found her." The crowd went silent. "I found a girl who gave bread to a stranger when she had none for herself, a girl who stood up to power with nothing but dignity. That girl taught me what wealth truly means." He turned to Felix. "And you tried to crush her spirit because she refused to bow. That says more about your soul than her worth." The village erupted in applause. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. She stepped forward slowly. "You lied to me," she whispered when she reached him. "I did," David replied gently, "but only so you could love the man, not the money." She paused, looked around at the cheering crowd, then smiled faintly. "And I did." Then, before the whole village, she stepped into his arms, not as a beggar and a poor girl, but as equals in heart. The days that followed were unlike anything Amara had ever experienced. She was no longer the poor girl with dusty shoes. Newspapers from Lagos to Accra were running stories about the village girl who stole a billionaire's heart. Reporters arrived in Abejukolo, clicking photos, asking about her childhood, her grades, her daily life. Women admired her. Young girls stared at her with wide eyes. Men who once ignored her now greeted her with awkward politeness. But Amara was overwhelmed. David had invited her to Lagos to spend time in his world. A private plane, a glass tower of a penthouse, dinner with foreign investors, luxury cars that moved like clouds, yet something felt distant. In Lagos, people didn't fetch water. They didn't speak softly. They didn't look you in the eye. Amara missed the smell of roasting maize, the sound of goats bleating in the afternoon, the way her mother hummed while cooking ogbono soup. David noticed the change in her. "You're quiet," he said one evening as they sat on a rooftop, the skyline sparkling behind them. "I don't know if I fit here," she whispered. "You fit in my heart," he said. She smiled sadly. "But your heart lives here in this world, and I'm not sure mine does." He leaned closer. "Amara, I didn't bring you here to change you. I brought you here so I could show you everything I am and let you decide. Decide. If you stay in the village, I'll build my life there. If you choose this life, I'll make space for you, but either way, I won't let go." Her eyes filled. "And if I don't know what to choose, then I'll wait until your heart is ready." Amara returned to Abejukolo the next week. Alone, she needed time. Time to walk the same red soil she grew up on. Time to speak to her mother under the moonlight. Time to kneel by her father's old grave and ask, "What would you do if love asked you to become someone new?" And then one morning, while helping a young girl with her math homework under the mango tree, Amara felt something shift in her, not in her surroundings, in her. She realized she didn't need to leave who she was behind to walk beside David. She only needed to walk with him, on her terms. David sat alone in his Lagos penthouse, staring at the untouched dinner on the table. It had been 2 weeks since Amara left. Every day he checked his phone. Every night he imagined her walking through the door. But there was no word. Only silence and that quiet fear that maybe he had pulled her too far too fast. Until one evening, as the city lights flickered and thunder rolled in the distance, his doorbell rang. He opened the door, and there she stood, Amara, drenched. From the rain, her long braids clinging to her face, dressed not in a designer outfit but in a bold red Ankara dress, body-hugging, soaked yet striking. She looked like a queen risen from the soil. David blinked, speechless. She stepped in, water dripping from her lashes, voice calm. "I'm not here to be saved, David. I never wanted to save you. I'm here to build, with you, but not as your shadow." He reached for her hands. "You're not my shadow. You're my match." She nodded. "Then let's match." The next few weeks changed everything. Amara didn't hide in his world. She began shaping it. She created a foundation, using part of David's wealth to fund girls' education in rural villages. She turned the spotlight away from her romance and toward her purpose. When the media asked how it felt to be the girl who won a billionaire, she answered, "I didn't win him. We found each other, in dust and in dignity." David stood by her side, not as a man showing her off, but as a man humbled by her presence. Even Felix, now disgraced, left the village with no legacy but gossip. Amara's mother moved to the city, finally resting her feet after years of labor. Her brother Chima enrolled in one of the best schools in Lagos, proudly calling David brother. One evening, Amara and David walked through Abejukolo again. No bodyguards, no suits. Just 2 people, hand in hand. They stopped under the same mango tree where it all began. David knelt, not with a ring yet, but with a promise, whether in silk or in dust. "I'll choose you. Always." Amara smiled, resting her hand over his. "No matter where we walk, I'll bring my roots with me." The people of Abejukolo had never seen a wedding like it, not in the village's 100-year history. It wasn't because of the money, though there was plenty. It wasn't the photographers or the gold-threaded fabrics, or the guests flown in from Lagos, Accra, and even London. It was because of how it was done. Amara had insisted, "If I'm marrying a billionaire, I want to do it barefoot. In my father's land, with my people beside me." And David? He only smiled and said, "Then I'll kneel where your ancestors stood." The mango tree was decorated with lanterns and white cloth. The air smelled of hibiscus, roasted yam, and burning incense. 100 chairs were set, but most people stood, climbing rooftops, leaning from windows, all hoping to glimpse the girl who had walked dusty roads and returned a queen. Amara wore a flowing white Ankara gown, stitched by hand, with beaded jewelry from her mother's youth. Her long braids were tied with cowrie shells, her eyes lined with kohl. She walked to the tree alone. David waited beneath it, dressed in a white agbada, his heart thudding louder than the talking drums. When she reached him, he dropped to his knees, not just to propose, but to honor the journey that brought them there. "Amara," he said, voice trembling, "you gave a stranger bread when you had none. You saw a man when the world saw a beggar. If you let me, I'll spend every day making sure the world sees you, truly sees you, for who you are." He opened a small calabash box, not gold, not velvet, just carved wood from Abejukolo's forest. Inside lay a ring made of ivory and diamond, symbol of old and new earth and sky. "Will you marry me as you are and let me love you for all that you'll become?" Amara's lips trembled. "I was born with nothing," she whispered, tears falling, "but you made me feel like I've had everything all along." She placed her hand in his. "Yes, David, I will." As the village cheered, fireworks lit up the sky, not from machines but from children with sparklers, from elders with chants, from ancestors smiling down through the stars. And somewhere in the distance, a roadside mango tree stood taller than ever before. For under its shade, a poor student once gave bread to a beggar, and in return, she was given the world. The wedding was over, but Amara's journey was just beginning. In the months that followed, life in Lagos moved fast, too fast. Media outlets kept chasing her, companies kept sending invites, and women's groups began asking her to speak at their events. She wasn't just David's wife anymore. She had become a symbol of hope, the girl from the village who rose without losing her soul. But the attention came at a cost. She couldn't walk through markets without whispers, couldn't post a simple picture without people dissecting her body, her clothes, her hair, and slowly the noise began to drown her. One evening, David found her sitting on the floor of their living room, still in her loungewear, braids messy, phone face down. She didn't look up when he entered. He sat beside her silently. After a long pause, she said, "I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore." David reached for her hand. "Be the girl who gave me bread. That's enough for the world." "But is it enough for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. That question lingered. Amara took time off. She returned to Abejukolo alone, no press, no staff, just her. She stayed with her mother, washed her own clothes, fetched water like before, and walked barefoot again. There she rediscovered herself. She began teaching at the local school. Not as a guest speaker. As a teacher, she told girls, "You don't have to marry a billionaire to matter. You only need to believe that you do." Villagers started calling her Mama Future. Meanwhile, in Lagos, David faced pressure. His board was restless. Investors whispered, "She's ruining his focus." Shareholders asked if he was still serious about leadership. David stood tall in a board meeting and said, "If you think love makes a man weak, you've never known real love." Then he shocked the entire company by announcing that he was stepping down as CEO. "I've built enough. It's time I start living." 1 month later, David appeared at the Abejukolo school in plain clothes. No convoy, just him and a notebook. He entered Amara's classroom quietly and sat among the children. She blinked mid-lesson. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, learning from the best. That day, Amara and David walked home through the village like two school teachers in love. They passed the mango tree again. This time a little girl was reading beneath it. The world had changed, and they had become part of that change. A year had passed since the wedding. Amara and David now lived between Abejukolo and Lagos, dividing their time between community work and quiet retreats away from the public eye. But they weren't just living. They were building something bigger. They had created the ANO Foundation Academy, a network of schools across West Africa for children like Amara once was, brilliant, invisible, overlooked. Each school was built not with glass and steel, but with love and local hands. Every classroom was painted with village colors, each desk carved by local artisans. Girls were taught coding and storytelling. Boys learned leadership and compassion. The schools were growing fast, but with each new achievement came whispers. Will she ever give him a child? David needs an heir. She's building schools but not a family. She's too focused on herself. One evening, after a long day at the school site, Amara and David sat on their clay veranda in Abejukolo. The stars shimmered like quiet drums across the sky. She held a warm mug of millet tea. He was barefoot, reading papers. "David," she asked softly, "do you ever wish we had a child by now?" He looked up. "I think about it, but only because I want to see what our love would look like with tiny feet and curious eyes." She smiled, then grew quiet. "I've been scared." "Of what?" "That I won't be enough. That I'll break under the pressure. That I'll give too much to the world and not enough to a child." David took her hand. "You gave me everything, Amara. You gave this village a future. If you give your heart to a child, even a piece of it, it'll be more than enough." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for the first time in her life she let herself imagine it. Not just being loved, but being someone's beginning. But fate had its own rhythm. A few weeks later, Amara fell ill. At first, she thought it was exhaustion. But then came the nausea, the sleepless nights, the trembling in her hands. David rushed her to a private clinic. Hours later, a nurse returned with wide eyes and a gentle smile. "Mrs. Ose Ajay, you're pregnant." Shock. Silence. Then a slow smile broke across Amara's face. Raw, overwhelmed, joyful. David sank to his knees, both hands in his hair. "You're carrying us," he whispered. And in that moment, in that quiet clinic room filled with heartbeats and tears, two worlds fused. But the journey wasn't smooth. The pregnancy was delicate. Doctors advised rest, care, less travel. It meant putting projects on hold, saying no to speaking events, watching others take the lead on the very schools she'd birthed, and once again the world began whispering, "She's fading. She's no longer the icon she was." She chose motherhood over her mission. And for a moment Amara questioned herself again, until she looked in the mirror and saw her growing belly and said aloud, "I am my mission." In the final scene of this chapter, Amara stood under the mango tree, belly full and heart steady. Children gathered around her as she told them a new folk tale, one she was still writing, the story of a girl who gave bread to a stranger and ended up rewriting the future for all those who came after her.